Hey guys, it's Anya and I'm here with my January wrap up. I entered this month somewhat cautiously, knowing that I really was excited to have a few weeks to read, but also knowing that uni for me was coming up and this is my last ever semester of my degree. So I've been feeling the busyness and the toll that that's taken on my reading, particularly with the amount that I also have to read for class that's limiting my time for pleasure reading. But I've still very much been enjoying the escapism that comes with just tucking myself away from that, and especially enjoying the first couple of weeks where I just had time to read whatever I wanted. I'm going to very quickly first talk about the two books I read for class, and those were The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole and The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. If you know anything about these books, I'm sure you can guess that I'm doing a class on Gothic literature, and this serves as a really great introduction into the beginnings of that genre. I have to say both of these were very hugely different, and the biggest thing about that is their size. I felt that The Castle of Otranto moved very quickly in ways that were almost a little too abrupt, and I would have enjoyed it more had it taken the time to explore all the supernatural elements of it. Whereas The Mysteries of Udolpho really took its time and had beautifully poetic writing, but really dwelt on the sights and the experiences of the characters, and the amount of descriptive language in this was just really overwhelming and definitely served to extend the book far beyond what it needed to be. That being said, I really appreciated what these books did. I've enjoyed studying them thus far, and if you are yourself at all interested in Gothic literature, I would say that they're very good places, of course, to start because they were literally part of the foundation of that genre, but also just to explore. Both definitely have their individual merits that have allowed them to stand the test of time. I'm not going to give these a rating, but I did enjoy them very much. Now I'm going to go in order of what I actually read this month, and I decided to open up the year with a book that I was definitely sure I would end up enjoying, and that was Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book to the Skyward series, which is Brandon Sanderson's young adult sci-fi. We follow the character of Spencer, who lives on a planet that's constantly bombarded by war and an invading alien species which they have to fight against. And the entire colony on her planet has basically revolved around this war against the Krell. And Spencer herself wants to become a pilot, which is the highest calling since they serve as the defensive force. However, after her father fled battle and was labelled a coward, this greatly has limited Spencer's own place in that society because it's left her with the repercussions of that label. Skyward was one of my favourite books of 2020, being a super fast-paced and just super intriguing story. Before going into Starsight, I had heard that this series takes a wildly different turn from what is expected and set up in the first book, which I would have to say didn't surprise me too much, knowing Brandon Sanderson to be the king of world building. And going into Starsight, I did really enjoy the way that the world opened up, and we got to see so much more of the circumstances that surround Spencer, her colony, and also the rest of the universe within this world. One thing I really loved about Skyward was the flight company dynamic that Spencer develops with her classmates, and seeing that sort of renewed and explored in a different manner in Starsight was really fun. I do wish it had slightly focused more on the previous characters which we got to meet, because there's so much still left within that. However, I do know that that will be coming in the future books, or at least I expect it will be coming in the future books. And I'm really excited just in general for where this story is going to go, because it has such a wide open world at this point that anything could happen. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I continued on the reading marathon which I had started last month with Saga Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughan. This of course is just the continuation of the Saga graphic novel series that continued to expand on the story that had been set up in the previous volumes. This story just continues to be bucket loads of fun and really encapsulates everything that I would want in a graphic novel series, using a fantastic art style with really clever and funny dialogue and also super interesting characters. I've come to the end of the volumes which I owned, but I know this story continues for many volumes more, so I'm gonna definitely be looking into buying those and continuing on with the series because I do genuinely really enjoy it. Especially for how quick these reads are, they are so worth every minute of it. I ended up giving this, as I have with the rest of the series, 5 out of 5 stars. Afterwards, I picked up Percy Jackson and the Greek Heroes. This is essentially just a short story collection detailing and explaining the Greek hero myths, but through the voice of Percy Jackson, who basically narrates this story and tells us all about them in his clever, funny, snarky voice. Greek heroes are definitely the part of Greek mythology that I'm the least familiar with, so I was looking forward into the learning aspect of this book, and it definitely provided that. As ever, Rick Riordan creates a super accessible but still informative platform for teaching Greek mythology and explaining the different aspects of it and how they link up. The actual stories themselves, of course, are myths, so they're not made up by Rick Riordan. But the addition of Percy Jackson as the voice was very fun, and that's what allows it to feel like a Rick Riordan book. That being said, it's a little bit like I had with the problems in Trials of Apollo, where snarky silliness lacks the cleverness that's so prevalent in the Percy Jackson original series and also in the Magnus Chase series, and became a little bit detrimental at times, like it was trying too hard to be funny. It's not my favourite of the Percy Jackson books by any means. It was very informative and I'm glad I read it. For the actual writing itself, I know Rick Riordan can do better. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. The final 2 books, which I'm going to talk about, may be a bit of a throwback for some of you because these have been on my TBR pile since 2015. The reason that's a throwback is because that means they were popular on BookTube in 2015, which is why I ended up buying them, but then lost that popularity, and hence it took me so long to actually visit those stories myself. The first of these books was Talon by Julie Kagawa. This is a story revolving around dragons and dragon hunters. Essentially, it's an urban fantasy where dragons are part of society and actually are hugely influential, but this influence relies on them being able to pass as humans. So we follow our main character and her twin brother who continue on their training and infiltrating humanity by passing off as normal teens. This is imbued alongside it with politics of the dragon world and also the dragon hunting order of St. George, who are the biggest dangers to our main characters. This book surprised me with how much I ended up enjoying it, and the biggest part that I loved was just the normal human aspects of Ember, our protagonist, being a teenager and allowing herself to form friendships and just explore living on the beach, learning to surf and doing all the things she wants to do. There is also a romance aspect which I found very enjoyable, and I really like just the whole revisiting YA romance because it's not something I read in quite a long time, but it's just got this brilliant giddiness to it that I really missed. I think this series has such an intriguing premise in terms of the power that this dragon world has and the way that it's manipulating the ordinary human world. I don't think that was fully explored as much as it could be in this, but definitely creates a setup for the books further within this series. All in all, this book was a really pleasant surprise and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I read in the month of January was Side Effects May Vary by Julie Murphy. This book centres around a girl named Alice who is diagnosed with cancer and essentially creates a list of getting back at people who have harmed her. However, she eventually unexpectedly goes into remission and is forced to deal with the consequences of the actions which she has taken. I have to say, this book was very, very nearly a DNF. About halfway through, I almost gave up. And the biggest reason for that is that Alice, our protagonist, is just a horrible person. While there was absolutely exploration of the grief and the hardships which she has to go through, I couldn't quite get to the point where I was appreciating the recovery process and the things that she was facing, because she was just really manipulative, unkind, and actually deserved all the consequences that ever came to her. And that's not meaning her illness in general, that's meaning the consequences for her actions. The big saving grace of this book is Harvey, whose perspective we also get to read from, who's Alice's best friend who has been in love with her his whole life. The way Alice treats Harvey is absolutely horrible, but Harvey himself is an absolute sweetheart who, when he learns to start standing up for himself and truly just starts getting a story of his own, is really satisfying to read. I finished this book 100% for Harvey's sake. Harvey is a gem. He deserves so much better than Alice, and I kind of wish the book was just about him. I gave this book a tentative 2 out of 5 stars because it did actually end up getting better after that halfway point, as Alice becomes less despicable. It's a book that I'm glad I've got off my TBR, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you think the premise sounds like something you really like and you're really into young adult contemporary novels. That's it from me today and for the books I read in the month of January. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!